Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. This is episode 100 for this podcast. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Ted Meissner, and today we're going to be exploring how mindfulness competencies are being trained in programs for other professions, in this case, social work. Come on, let's get started. Our guests today are Caitlin Elsaesser. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Gio Iocano. Gio, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Lisa Werkmeister Rozas, welcome. Good to see you.
Buenos días.
And Vivien Roman-Hampton, glad you could be here as well.
Thank you for having us.
This is so exciting, and I'm glad that all of you could be here today. We're going to be talking about the Engaged Mindfulness course, but before we get into that, maybe each of you could say a little bit about who you are and what you do. Caitlin, could we start with you?
Sure. So I am a professor at the School of Social Work at UConn, and I'm also a mindfulness teacher and facilitator. One of my favorite things to do is to use mindfulness practices and deep listening to bring people together around particularly building power with each other across differences, to make the world a better place.
Well, thank you. Lisa, how about you next?
Sure. I am also a professor at the University of Connecticut School for Social Work and the director of the Puerto Rican Latino Studies project that we have there. And my both my research and my course instruction focuses around coloniality, oppression, and using things like mindfulness and social engaged mindfulness really has helped, I think, deliver the kinds of support and tools that our students need when they are advocating on behalf of their clients for social justice.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Vivien, how about you?
That's a loaded question. What do I do? So I am a second year doctoral student at UConn. My research focus is on mindfulness and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm also the director of outreach and teacher development for the Mindfulness Institute for Emerging Adults. And when I'm not doing those two things, I founded a group mental health practice that focuses specifically on marginalized communities and providing equitable mental health care.
Thank you. And Gio, how about you?
So I am also a professor at the School of Social Work, University of Connecticut, and I've been in the mindfulness, I guess you can say, world universe for a while clinically and now academically, and figuring out always how to, in a very present moment, process how to incorporate mindfulness and contemplative approaches, not only to address well-being and prevent things like burnout and all these other things that we talk about a lot, and how the benefits, how mindfulness can benefit those things, but also to Caitlin's point, like how we can actually sustain the work that we're doing in the community, in the world, to actually bring about positive and meaningful change. So,
Yeah. And such wonderful themes to have around accessibility and sustainment. So thank you all for all of that work and the work that you're doing. Above and beyond what we're going to be talking about today. So it dropped my eye, and for those of you who are watching or listening to this, I've got a link where links are found so you can read for this yourself. An article about some work that was being done about mindfulness in social work education. So I'm wondering how this program idea even got started. And I'm wondering, maybe, Vivien, you want to start, and then everyone's going to have their little bit of commenting on it.
I was actually going to say, I think Caitlin should start because I was brought into this project, and that's how I actually met my family of mindful researchers here.
Awesome. Caitlin, come on in.
Well, I would say it's a tightly braided, beautiful road of how we got here. Um, we each, in our own way, have focused on mindfulness in working with frontline providers. And I think Out of conversations, it emerged from our friendship, which we practice together, we have conducted research together. And as those conversations progressed, we talked about, like, mindfulness is our most important strategy for staying with the work. Many of us have been influenced by Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings around engaged mindfulness of, take care of yourself so that you can be better prepared to serve the world. And in the way that we train social workers, at least historically, the way many of us have been trained, there really was not a lot of embodiment and contemplative practice in that way of working. And so in these conversations, we said, like, if it's so effective for us, then we really want to bring this to our students, and we believe it has a lot of value. And also took a lot of inspiration from Thich Nhat Hanh's Order of Interbeing, where his initial offering to train frontline providers to be better prepared for the world started with social workers in Vietnam. So we found that really inspirational.
Thank you. And maybe you'd like to nominate the next person to say a little bit
Okay,
about the
now I'll tag
start of the
Vivien back.
program.
Yeah, so I came into this in a previous mindfulness project, working with Caitlin, and then was invited to join this one, and just felt that this was such, it seems to say, so silly to say novel, because really when you think about what we're doing, it feels like a should in there, like we should be doing this. But it was a really exciting opportunity to start bringing mindfulness, and socially engaged mindfulness, right? So we're bringing in this experience of what it means to be a social worker and truly be present. And how do we do that? And so to have the opportunity to work with Lisa and Gio and Caitlin in this way of a collective knowledge gathering, a collective experience of what we wanted to generate and share, and also to bring in social work students to talk to us about what is important about beginning this career. We're all social workers and we have all had different lived experiences with this. And I can speak for myself in that there was no one telling me in social work school that I should be taking care of myself so much as like, here's how you help others. And we can't keep emptying a well that we never fill. And so now to have the opportunity to offer these teachings in this way that feels accessible and that really speaks to what's happening in our current times so that people can have longevity in this really important work, or can like make choices about how they want to do this work. Do I want to do this work on a macro level or a micro level? Do I want this to be, really activist oriented? But just to recognize that the power that one can hold in this practice and taking care of self, being like self-renewing and then turning it toward others was just, I couldn't pass that up.
Wonderful. And who would you like to nominate next?
Gio.
I mean, how far back do we want to go here? This is we can go back to my days as an MSW Master Social Work student, perhaps, and just the frustration. I remember needing to pick a concentration, and one was like social justice or policy. I can't remember what the exact name, or clinical mental health. I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? And I've always wanted to go into more therapy, mental health work, but then bringing in that really deep socio-political critical consciousness aspect to the work. And so when I became a therapist clinician, working as a practitioner, I was always dissatisfied with how we brought in mindfulness into that mental health world. And within education, yeah, because the self-care piece is, highly talked about, or is starting to, I guess, but we're never really taught how we actually do that, or how we actually practice self-compassion or gentleness with ourselves when we're working in this area. And so I think from there, the dissatisfaction led to wanting to, study this further, working with LGBTQ young people, and doing practice with them, mental health practice with them, and just seeing how mindfulness had such an impact in terms of their happening in the world and like navigate things more in a safer way, or being able to incorporate self-advocacy or advocacy approaches to their mindfulness sort of practice or toolkit, if you will. And then from there, just wanting to continue to build that. And so this very serendipitous, or maybe not, just very beautiful moments of synchronicity with bumping into Caitlin and talking about these things early on at the UConn School of Social Work, and Lisa and I having this very, kind of aligned, integrated sort of way of talking about contemplative practices and how that the spiritual element and how that kind of supports us in this work and in as professors, as practitioners. And then the beautiful meeting with Vivien afterward, and just, it was definitely a magical period. So we continue to find ways to bring these practices in from that critical consciousness perspective, which, I mean, maybe that's a nice dovetail, but I think, Lisa, that's certainly a beautiful domain that you've really contributed to.
Great segue. Come on in, Lisa. How about for you?
Yeah, so I definitely think critical consciousness has always been really important in terms of, from the way I teach, to really helping students understand the importance of it in the work that they do. And I agree with Gio that the way that this kind of practice is able to facilitate and support that is really quite remarkable. I do think I come at this from a slightly different angle, where I had practiced a meditation and mindfulness earlier on and was in and out of it for a while, and was in a period of really discovering another path, which was being a part of the Inca cosmology, which my heritage is Peruvian. And in talking in so many different ways to my wonderful friends and colleagues here, the kind of connections that were drawn between that practice that I had and the practice that I currently was developing was so profound, and it seemed like it had such meaning as far as this needs to be shared, and it needs to be shared as a collective, because the practice is it is a collective practice. And I just felt like the expansiveness of all of our different ways of interpreting and practicing, but still having really core, essential, fundamental similarities, was beautiful, and really felt not like, I can't even say, I don't want to say not at all limiting, felt expansive and really a place where I could grow and we could really grow the field.
Terrific. Thank all of you on that. And there's so many wonderful themes that are part of this, is the inclusiveness of whatever someone's background is, how this may be helpful to them, and the desire to be supportive and really foster this coming together. Now, out of that was an end result is a multi-week program that is embedded. It's optionals, if I'm understanding correctly, for those who are on the pathway. I'm wondering if you could describe just a little bit about what that program looks like, and just asking each of you, what is your favorite part and perhaps your least favorite part of the program? And if, Lisa, we can start with you, and then we'll come back around through everybody.
The program overall is I think set up to deliver, and I'm going to let other people probably fill in maybe some more of the details, but to set up really an understanding of what socially engaged mindfulness is, an ability to engage in it and practice it, and really with a collective determine, what do you need more of? What do you need less of? Where am I going to kind of engage outside of the practice that we have in the classroom? And I think that, so I'm going to let someone else kind of talk more about the specifics as it relates to socially engaged mindful techniques and things. I will say, from my favorite part is when we talk about the idea of interbeing. And for me, again, going back to my own practice of Inca cosmology, that is the core center. It is about reciprocity, or what we call Aini, and kind of really understanding how important our interrelationships are interbeing with everything, with humanity, with the environment, with the world, with our ancestors, with so many different sources of energy that hold us up and support us. So kind of thinking about that and how we understand the animate world, I think has always been something that idea of interbeing has given to me, and really given a solid foundation and a really deep understanding and appreciation. And so being able to provide that perspective for students and have them maybe at first struggle a little bit with trying to figure out what does that mean, but then come to a place where they feel it, I think is absolutely one of the best places that I find myself in those classes.
And how about one of the things that might be more challenging? And bear in mind, that doesn't have to be an aspect of it beyond logistics. It can be that kind of stuff too.
I think for me, probably one of the more challenging pieces would be one, probably talking about suffering, because I think for students, that is also a pretty big topic that is difficult to wrap your head around. And I think for me too, is what do we mean by suffering, and how do we understand that? And particularly when we think about our clients or the larger world in terms of what does their suffering mean and what does my suffering mean, not in comparison to, but in relation to their suffering. I think as a social worker, because that is such, our call is to be with that, I think it's often a struggle for me to kind of figure out, how do I really do that? And I think that when we talk about the piece in the course about suffering, I often come back to that place as, how do I really engage it? Am I really engaging in that, and not only my own suffering, but the suffering of others, and it within the socially engaged mindfulness realm. So I think, yes, that's a place where I often find myself like, and I need to keep working.
Suffering is not a small topic. Yeah. Vivien, how about for you? What are things you like best, and what's some aspect that's the most challenging for you?
What I like best is being able to witness a student's journey. So when they first start out and it's like, you want me to be quiet for how long? And then, by the end of the semester, okay, that silence is fine. I can lead into silence. But all of that is just such a reminder of our beginner's mind, and like stepping into this space and reminding people that they're right where they need to be. So yes, somebody else might right away just take to silence or take to a concept like suffering and just get it. And for someone else, there really might be a lot of sort of turning it around and looking at it from so many different ways. And that's okay. You're right where you need to be. And so I just really appreciate being able to witness that. And what I would say is a challenge is that the course isn't long enough. I would like the course to be a year long. I'd like it to be part of a like contemplative minor. And so, yeah, that's my challenge.
Thank you. And who knows what the future may hold? Who knows? Caitlin, how about for you? What are the things you like best, and what are you finding most challenging?
I take so much joy in witnessing the building of the collective in this program. So we were really deliberate in how we built the curriculum to build in relational mindfulness. So we do a lot of tending to the connection that the group feels. We do dyadic practice, we do mindful listening in circle, and we really talk about it as an extension of our practice. So, we're wanting to train our social workers. Like mindfulness isn't just what you do sitting on the cushion. it's what we bring to life. That's really something we talk about a lot. And so we do include, solo, silent, contemplative practice, but also a lot of deep listening. And just to see the power of the collective emerge over the course of the 8 weeks is so moving. And some of the things that our students have said about the belonging that they've found. And then we all feel like the power that's emerging from that collective space. And, I won't go too much into this, but we talk a lot about self-care and kind of like honestly, the bullshit around self-care of like, oh, it's like go take care of yourself after you're burned out from working 50 hours a week, and we're not going to put any time in your work week so that you take care of yourself. And so we see this collective piece of tending to our well-being as absolutely essential, that like we need to have collective spaces that tend to our well-being, and then that inner interbeing that Lisa was talking about, that like my well-being is tied to your well-being, and when we're well together, the amount of power that comes out of that is pretty unstoppable. Yeah, so that's one of my favorite parts. And I'd say the challenge, and I've grown a lot in this way, I would say, in facilitating this program. Um, but it's not always easy. Our students carry so much weight, and often some have a lot of experience with mindfulness and some have very little. And so it's actually really hard to come into contact with your body and the present moment. Like we've realized, like for some of our students, like just being in the present moment is a little triggering without like devices and like, like we're just so distracted. And so learning to really um like like not everybody's loving the practice right away. And I've had to really deepen my faith in the practice, and also my comfort with like letting folks have that journey that Vivien was talking about, that like the resistance is part of this and it's like part of the path. And I think that's a direction we all hope social work education moves into. And it's really not at all the dominant approach of like embodiment and contemplative practice. So for many of our students, it's new. So we had to like really be comfortable with the discomfort in our collective at times, especially early on.
Yeah, and it can be a challenge to sell the idea of disconnecting in the service of connection. That could be really tough to wrap your head and heart around. Thank you, Caitlin. Gio, how about for you? What do you like best and what's most challenging?
Yeah, I think the best part is that we're working with students who are deeply committed to social, racial, environmental, economic justice. And I think what's beautiful is that is an environment where we can explicitly say, these are the inner practices that we know from thousands of years of evidence to show that they bring the potential for well-being, for liberation, and then we can connect that to these practices that we know social workers potentially want to engage in, that will bring well-being and liberation and justice, but working outwardly, supposedly, in systems, in institutions that we could potentially impact. And so I think the most beautiful part is that there's an opportunity for building capacity to stay in that very contentious, polarized kind of climate that we are swimming in, and being able to sort of stay grounded to whatever extent possible to continue to doing that work towards liberation. For me, that's always kind of been there from early days, and so to see it and explicitly talk about it and have like the platform, I guess, on some level to be able to talk about that is fantastic. And I think the most frustrating part is that a lot of times it's misunderstood what we're trying to do, a socially engaged approach to mindfulness. Just really conflating social engagement contemplative work with, teaching a clinical skill to clients or service users and what have you. And so, we're not teaching necessarily on how to run a mindfulness clinical program or something like that. I mean, that is certainly a part of it, but it's deeper than that. And I think that often gets misunderstood, and I'm okay just trying to find some equanimity with that, and just be here with it. So thank you for asking that question. Actually, as I feel a lot of movement happening here internally. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a big one, right? Because it's not a matter of confining it to one territory, but increasing it in the different ways it can help. And that's actually a segue to another thing I'm wondering about is, again, a personal perspective on what each of you finds why mindfulness is helpful for social workers. It's like, what is it about mindfulness, however you think about it, because there are lots of different ways to think about mindfulness, that's really such a key ingredient to bringing social work out and the benefits it can have for people that you're working with. Caitlin, I wonder if we could start with you on this one.
Well, I'm glad you're letting each of us speak because we could talk for hours about this one. So I'm going to try to just pick one strand, and I know my dear colleagues will pick up and friends will pick up other strands. But something that we care a lot about is identity and power and learning to work across difference with less harm and more solidarity. And one thing that we talk about a lot is that systems of oppression, and which obviously are foundational to the harm that we see in the world today and how we've gotten to this mess that we're in, this time of unraveling, they live in the body. So they live in how we perceive other people. They live in whether we're willing, how deeply are we willing to listen, whether we feel like we need to save someone else or fix something, our capacity to walk alongside. And so there's an element, this piece we're talking about, like critical consciousness, of really taking some of this material around the ways that we're conditioned, which is not our fault, but we can take responsibility for it with our practice. So we look at like, oh, like how do these systems live in our bodies? And then bringing the practice to bring kindness and compassion to the experience, but also like honesty, and then to see students bear witness to each other in this like the safe container that we create with mindful listening. That there's shifting and opening, and we see that with our students saying like, like I feel like this has transformed my ability to be with a client and not jump in and try to save them. So that's a piece that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you. Vivian, how about for you?
Hmm. I mean, all these pieces are so interconnected. But the one when you asked that question, the word that bubbled up to the surface for me was awareness. And as someone who works with clinicians and provides supervision and have seen sort of the evolution of someone in their own work, awareness to me is so powerful. It's so easy for people to point out what everybody else is doing wrong. Like, oh, here's what you should do. Oh, stop drinking. Stop doing this. Okay, well, but how are you showing up in that space? And that's about awareness. And so, we say in social work that we try to come at these experiences from this place of, I think we sort of imply like non-judgment, but what does that really mean? Right? And so how do we hold our awareness so that we can recognize, am I sitting in this space where I might be sort of showing a lens of judgment or like speaking to some sense of judgment. And now I want someone to just open up and tell me everything that's going on with themselves. So for me, awareness as part of my mindfulness practice is so important because I want to check in on like how I'm doing in this space with this person, how I'm showing up for this person, how I'm showing up for myself. And I'm hoping that at the same time, without saying it, I'm modeling this so that someone sitting across from me can sort of like, yeah, I need to sort of hold this moment of being able to sit with like a really difficult experience and just be aware that it exists right now. And like that is so powerful. So I think I must say that generally as a regular answer when like other clinicians will say, well, what's really important about mindfulness? And I'll say, well, what's really important about it being a clinician is being self-aware. And you get that when you practice mindfulness. So that is probably my big piece that I'll stick with for now.
Nicely said. Thank you. And such an important aspect to this of when those judgments show up, because they will as human beings, is the acknowledgement of, but I haven't walked in your shoes. I don't know your life. How can I judge? Maybe not so much. Lisa, how about for you?
Oh, it's great. It's a great segue for what I've been thinking about is I truly believe that social work is the major part of our, I guess, education or knowledge building is really understanding the human condition overall. And I think that it is about our being with and in and working through kind of all the aspects of the human condition that there are. There are so many. And I think part of that is also when thinking about students and working with them to develop social work identity and that particular and supporting that particular, which I think is the fundamental piece of our work, understanding the human condition. It's helping them to stay grounded, accountable, and connected to the purpose of the profession, to the purpose of their role as a social worker. And I think that this really does help support that aspect of it. And I think it follows very closely along with what a lot of what Vivien was saying around the awareness piece of yourself and all other beings. But I also think in terms of thinking about the advocacy piece that is so essential to social work, thinking about helping them recognize how to support strategic efforts rather than reactive action. And I think we can look at that from a grand scale in terms of community organizing or policy, as well as just a one-on-one being with a client, because part of being the human condition is reactivity. So really trying to formulate an understanding of oneself around that and other folks, and working with that in a way that's, again, supportive. And strategic often sounds kind of cold, but I just mean in terms of intentional, maybe is a better word rather than reactionary.
Yeah, and especially in the complexities of one's social life. It's not just what's going on in here, it's what's going on with everything around you. That too. And everybody else's stuff. Gio, how about for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of what has already been said here is very similar and aligned. I think there's a part of me that remembers and recalls that many of us that go into social work are drawn to social work for a particular reason, perhaps lived experiences of marginalization or some type of pain or trauma that has, just kind of led to this place of wondering what they can do in the world to support, to alleviate suffering, to whatever extent that possible in their sphere of influence. And so I think that's a big piece for me, is that there is that possibility to actually go one step further and move towards a place of like deeper understanding of whether it's the systems of oppression that they are trying to grapple with or understand, that all of us are trying to understand, and perhaps regardless if they go into, social work is largely divided into sort of more clinical and then more community and policy work. And so regardless of where social workers end up in, I think for students, having that grounding, that base sort of training, I think is going to be incredibly helpful potentially for sustaining the work that they are doing and their own well-being. And so for me, I think that's what makes a program like this, and used in different ways as like a standalone or embedded in a classroom, and other ways of different modalities. And so I think that's the important piece here, that there is the potential for them to more deeply grasp in an embodied way what they are passionate about, what they want to do or be in collectively in the world. So I think that's always been a beautiful thing, and why that matters so much. And it's not just social work. I mean, we're already talking about expanding towards, working with human service or health and human service professionals, medical students, and what have you. So continuing to think of other areas where there might be, again, that sphere of influence for us.
Yeah. And again, a need for that minor to show up and be worked into the programs. Okay, so final question for each of you, and it's a bit of a double question. I'm wondering if you could think of one of your favorite examples that you can share without violating confidentiality, of course, but a favorite story you have about some outcome for participants, some shift, something that was very meaningful to you. And that's kind of the first part of it. And the second part of it is, what about that do you want to make sure that the listeners, the viewers today for this, what do you want them to have as a takeaway from our conversation today? Can we start with you?
Yeah. What a great question. Well, what first came to mind for me is, one of the gifts about being based in a university and in a program is the opportunity to have multiple points of contact with students and get to work in a longer way. And so we, had a cohort go through the program in the fall, and there were a lot of deep connections that came out of that experience among the students. They created like a list and wanted to keep in touch with each other. And then come this winter and spring, we're still in touch, and we have started to talk about building a day of mindfulness for the student body. And I can just see the connections are living on among the students. So we have one student who's like, oh, like I could bring in some of people I know in the community. I'll host a drum circle. And another student's like, well, I'll have a station for yoga. And another student's like, I want to lead some pranayama breath work, and just an excitement. It's like it feels like a bit of a groundswell. And the piece that I want to highlight in that is the beauty of co-creation, which is, we're very deliberate in our program with like circle listening. We talk about power a lot and our conditioning and building power with. And we also created the program through a process of co-creation. We worked with students to create this. And so there's a lot. Our intention, yes, is building deeper practice, but also building networks of power to create change in the world. And so I just have been like, we've been emailing about this day of mindfulness, and I opened up my inbox on Sunday, and I just see like all these emails from students who are part of planning it. And our students are really busy. They're working outside of their internship. They have caregiving responsibilities. So to see students engaged in this way, there's like that to me is the power of the practice and community. Like there's a collective care. It's like, all right, like we can do something. So that's the story I want to share.
Thank you, Caitlin. Lisa, how about for you?
I think I'm noticing so much that students share, and they share it in different ways, but I feel like the core keeps coming back to the same thing. This idea of fear and either recognizing a fear they didn't know they had or trying to work with the fear that either they just recently realized they had or knew that they had. Um, and how that fear could be some connected to everything from the grief over the harm that's happening in the world or the people that they love or know, fear of backlash, that is very prominent in our society today of different things, fear of being ashamed, of not doing enough or being a part of something that they want to dismantle. And the reason why I'm picking fear specifically is I do believe that fear is what holds the whole cycle and perpetuation of oppression together. And I feel like once for the students, there is this recognition that this fear that they hold for many different reasons is there, and they begin to want to look at it, work with it, and transform it to something different. I feel like that for me is there's so much hope in saying, oh, this is how we do it. This is how we dismantle oppression. And for them to have that connection, and they have it so many different ways, I just feel like, yeah, this is what we're supposed. This is our job, not only our job as instructors, but our job as social workers in our particular lived environment today. And so I think really my takeaway is just a tremendous amount of hope that if the students can walk away with even a little piece of that from one aspect of fear, however it's coming into them, I feel like it will not only afford them tremendous opportunity to continue that work, but also give so much to everyone, everything, all over. So,
Thank you, Lisa. Vivien, how about for you?
Ooh, okay. So I would say, without being too identifying, that um, being able to connect on a shared identity that isn't typically represented within the classroom and acknowledging that and feeling like as a result of that, as a result of being able to, so to speak, say, I see you, that someone feels seen. And then it's like opens up their ability to see others. And I think often when we feel like we're in spaces where maybe part of our self that feels really big isn't going to be witnessed or seen in some way, that we can be really protective and it may appear as closed off, but it's just like a natural, it's habit energy of protection. And so, in being able to shine a light and say, I see you, um, then witnessing their own experience now, sort of feeling like I can be myself here, is something that I really appreciate about this. Something as a takeaway is just a reminder that, Buddhism has been around for over 2,000 years. And when I think of even like the three vehicles or just Buddhism in general, it's like there's all these beautiful ingredients to Buddhism, and we all have access to those ingredients. We, as the four of us, had those ingredients and we made one recipe, but there's so many recipes to be made. And so if you're sitting here and you're listening, you have access to the ingredients too. And there's so many ways that you can embrace just the amazing texture and taste and wonder of these ingredients to make something that also offers a collective experience for yourself and the world.
Thank you, Vivien. And these are the ingredients of being human. And what are we going to make with them today? Nicely said. Gio, how about for you?
Yeah, and I'll just say, just to pick up on the collective piece, yes, yes, yes. I think what I'm really kind of seeing as a shift is basically the ways that we are living interconnectedness and interbeing, and just seeing that with students, the relationship transformation. I've never experienced that before in my years of teaching and in academia. I mean, we're taught to just like live above our shoulders here, and just it's we're about everything else that's happening, and as an instrument in our practice as social workers, we talk about the use of self and all that, but how are we connecting to the self, as we see it? And I think the other part, the collective, is that there is such I'm going to say thirst or excitement when we talk about this work with others in various academic institutions, in community, or in like practice spaces. And so there is something there that we know is not anything new per se, to Vivien's point. Like Buddhism has been around, and contemplative traditions have been around forever. And I guess just to kind of continue to be a part of that journey, of that collective movement, if you will. And I think that kind of brings me to that piece, going back to social work's practice and students in particular, is that like I'm reminded of some of the ways that we do practice in our work as students or as practitioners, when we think of rest as resistance, thinking of Audre Lorde's or Adrienne Maree Brown's sort of work, and just the ways that we can actually embody that. And that is an approach to justice and to liberation, when we take care of ourselves, when we rest, when we are able to be more present in the world. And so mindfulness and these contemplative practices from various traditions have really been a sort of important focal point for us to really emphasize in the academy and beyond in social work practice. So very important to remember that.
Thank you, Gio. There's so many layers to this, that this is a path we're on together. And the more together we are, the more that helps us all. So for those of you who are watching, I will have links where links are found, however you're consuming this episode. And I really want to thank our guests today. Caitlin, thank you so much for being here.
A true pleasure.
Lisa, thank you for sharing your insights.
A lovely gathering. Gracias.
Gio, thank you for being here as well.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us, Ted.
And Vivien, thanks so much for bringing in your insights as well.
Thank you. It was great to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please do remember to tap that subscribe button. Every little bit helps, and I really appreciate it. Remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. And I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.